I'd like to introduce Tanya Cruz, a Rutgers Business School 2015 graduate and Rutgers Club of New York City's Professional Development Chair. Tanya is responsible for coordinating with the Rutgers Office of Career Exploration and Success for tonight's program. Before I pass the program over, just a bit of housekeeping. We'll have all attendees be placed on mute for the duration of the discussion. If you have any questions, please send them through the Q&A function at any time during the program. After the presentation, we'll take some time to answer your questions. Today's presentation will be recorded and available for future viewing. Welcome, Tanya.
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Dana, for that lovely introduction. My name again is Tanya Cruz, and I'm a graduate of Rutgers Business School class of 2015. I've been involved with the Rutgers Club since graduating and as the Professional Development Chair since last year. To reiterate some of what Dana has shared already, the club provides opportunities for alumni to connect, engage, and interact with the university and fellow alumni through shared interests in programs, events, and other activities, really focused on networking and building postgraduate relationships. In recent years, the club has also taken an active role in fundraising, particularly to support an art and youth scholarship for students in New York City. There's a ton of opportunities to get involved with the club, and I'd be happy to discuss these with anyone joining tonight at a later date. You can also visit our website at rutgersclubnyc.org for more information. Then lastly, before diving into tonight's program, I'd like to share that we are continuing improving the club's offerings, particularly in this time of virtual programming and social distancing. We'd be really interested to learn more about what you'd like to see from the club in regards to professional development interests. And I know Dana and Colin will be sharing some of our contact information at the end, so you can reach out personally to share what you'd like to see more of from the club. Now, for tonight's programming, we thought it would be relevant to focus on the job search. So in the COVID-19 economy, job seekers need to consider their search from a holistic perspective. This webinar will provide information on industry trends, sectors that tend to fare better during the recession, recruitment strategies in the COVID-19 era, tips for your search, and resources to develop a well-informed personal strategy. In tonight's webinar, Developing Your Job Search Strategy, will be presented by Colin Van Liepchak. Colin is the Assistant Director of Alumni Career Development, and he has a dual reporting role to both Rutgers University Alumni Association and the Rutgers Office of Career Exploration and Success. A little bit more about Colin. In this role, he is responsible for the overall development, management, and assessment of alumni career-related initiatives. His portfolio includes the management of both career development and engagement opportunities available to more than 500,000 alumni. In addition, Colin designs and facilitates professional learning materials on a variety of career development and performance management topics, as well as provides career consultations and coaching to diverse groups of global professionals ranging from early career to executives. Now my privilege to turn it over to Colin. Thanks, Colin.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you tonight. Thank you for attending, and my extension of good wishes that everybody is well also. We have a lot of great material to cover tonight, so I'm really excited to get into it with you, and we'll certainly leave as much time as we can for Q&A at the end as well. So I just kind of want to frame our discussion tonight with this particular consideration here, that extraordinary times like this really call for a strong contextual understanding and a very strategic approach. And that's what we're really going to talk about here for the bulk of the evening, is how to develop the context, the understanding, and really look at the situation holistically as you're approaching a job search, but also what kind of approach can you start to develop in terms of your planning methods, resources you can utilize, major considerations to help you stand out from other job seekers in a positive way. So tonight, we'll start off with the idea of how to develop a strategy based on this holistic approach. So we're going to look at recession context, and we're using the most recent recession of 2008 and the post-recovery as our kind of foundational piece for that. Looking at some of the initial COVID-19 impact that we've seen in terms of trends, and not just the sectors that have been hit the hardest and which ones might fare a little bit better, but also how is this impacting things like recruitment and some of the talent management functions that we're seeing at different organizations, because that's going to help you to kind of plan much more strategically as you approach your job search. We'll also talk about how to implement this strategy. So based on the information that you have, how do you start to develop and utilize and leverage a really strong mindset, personal marketing and branding, just touching on that a little bit, and then incorporating all of that into your materials so that you can have as much success as possible in the job search. And then lastly, talking about some great resources, some external to Rutgers, but then a host of Rutgers related resources that we have available for you too. So when you're first developing the strategy, it's really helpful to assess the overall kind of landscape. Just general overview, high level stuff in terms of general recession. Obviously, companies and employers are really trying to avert risk as much as possible. So they're implementing things like hiring freezes, budget freezes, freezes in terms of promotion and career progression sometimes as well. In this case, we've also seen some salary reductions and things of that sort. But as part of the risk aversion process, companies are also investing in tech a little bit heavier at times. And we've seen that certainly here with COVID because of the nature of having to work from home and telecom. So the tech investment has been really strong there. But as this translates to more substantial and long-term trends that we may see, in recession times, you can see that tech investment sometimes leads to replacing staff. So they may invest in infrastructure upgrades through IT and things of that sort versus actual staff members. So this is where you'll see some of the cutting coming in, but also a reinvestment, if you will, from organizations. And so as you're thinking again holistically about this approach, how is it that you might be able to leverage that kind of information in a way to your benefit? So whether you work in IT or you have some ancillary skills or you do consulting, freelancing work, that might be more cost effective and help you to fill gaps in employment, but also, have relevant work experience in the meantime, income, as well as networking contacts that you're building up from things like freelancing or consulting jobs. Because to the organization, it might be more cost effective if they're not bringing somebody on permanent or with benefits or that kind of a thing. So it becomes that much more crucial as we look at this kind of repair versus replace mentality, if you will, and this risk aversion to develop skills and make sure that your skills are up to speed in terms of your given industry, but also having skills that are transferable in nature, cross-functional, and also future-proofing those skills as much as you can. And we're going to talk a little bit more specifically about things like professional development tonight. When we look at those industries in recession times that really fare to not do so well, based off this idea of risk aversion, hiring freezes, not spending money where you don't have to, it's pretty simple. And we see this certainly with COVID as well, but not investing as much in terms of, the job market in non-essential luxury or anything that involves more cost or not cutting costs. So in 2008, what we really saw in terms of industries that were impacted with this mentality were financial services. A great example of financial services that kind of runs the gamut is real estate. The housing bubble bursted, and we saw that everything from banking and the loan officers, everybody involved with the financial process, but all the way down the supply chain to construction of new projects, those who supply the lumber and materials for it. Throughout that entire kind of pathway related to housing was impacted by this, and it started really with the financial service sector of that. So you see how this has this kind of trickle down effect, if you will. Travel and hospitality, again, something we've seen, very much impacted by COVID as well, but also, cutting those luxuries, things like the vacations, the trips, and all of those related kind of professions, whether you're a taxi driver or an Uber driver or a caterer, or you work in some other kind of realm of hospitality related to hotel management, travel agents, all of those different professions really being impacted by this. Also, office supplies, as people are cutting back, there's less expenditure on non-essential office equipment. This translates over to things like printing and publishing. Think of, the Office Maxes and Staples, and how we had a lot of closures from those stores. But also this translates into people's personal lives beyond the workplace. So furniture stores and home furnishing stores, people aren't necessarily buying the new couch, the new recliner, the new entertainment systems, things like that, as they're kind of, tightening the belt, so to speak. And that also translates over to non-essential motor vehicles. Used car sales tending to do better than new car sales, but things like motorcycles, boats, those other kind of vehicles that would be deemed more of a luxury purchase. So all of these industries really faring not so well, generally speaking, in recession times, and that we saw certainly after 2008 and in the over a decade now in the recovery. In terms of some of the safer industries, and I caution safer here because generally speaking in recession, and I think this is certainly the case here with COVID, we see that no industry is completely immune to this. And, again, with all of the interrelated nature of different industries and jobs kind of coming together, it's hard to kind of operate in a vacuum. So as you imagine, the safer industries are the ones that are just the opposite of that, the essentials, and that we've seen here with COVID, and an interesting way of defining essentials as well. Those who are essential workers that maybe hadn't been considered essential before, those who might work in grocery or food prep or things like that. But also in recession times, those reasonable escapes, and we're going to take a look at what that means. So in terms of the essential industries that were a little bit safer, during the last recession, consumer goods and providers. So, the Charmans, those who are making toilet paper, now that we can finally find some again. But also the suppliers of that, the Walmarts, the Targets, those who are discount providers and also providing consumer goods at the same time. Healthcare, especially for growing numbers like our seniors. But, across the spectrum from, physician assistant, nurse practitioner, physicians, doctors, occupational therapy, physical therapy, all of those related healthcare industries. Death services, obviously that doesn't stop for recession or anything like that either. So funeral services being one that's actually fairly stable as well. Government and utilities. And this is one of those that is a little bit different in COVID times. So we're going to look at that in just a moment. But in 2011, so this is about 3 years or so now after the 2008 recession started, 99% of federal workers were actually pretty stable in their jobs. So historically, government positions tend to be a little bit more secure than other roles. A lot harder to break into as well, though. Educational field, especially for those who are tenured, whether as school teachers at the secondary level or below, or tenured professors and faculty, certainly. But, again, education, federal government, utilities, these all being essential kind of industries that we need, and utilize on an everyday kind of a basis. Again, the repair and maintenance, tying in more so with that reinvestment in existing equipment and facilities versus purchasing brand new for organizations. And then the 3 A's of finance, so accounting, auditing, and actuary. So things that would mitigate risk, things that will help to cut costs. Again, those are professions that save the company money and mitigate risk in most cases. Obviously, though, some of these industries do require some element of specialized training. So it's not necessarily something you can just pivot right into. However, if you work in a field like, say, HR or marketing or IT, something that is fairly ubiquitous, it does enable you then to maybe start thinking about your approach to the job search in a little bit of a different way, that you never thought about working within healthcare as an HR manager, but now that you see kind of where the safer sectors are, the ones that are a little bit more stable are, you think about, transitioning in that kind of a way. Also, in terms of those safe escapes, and sometimes they're referred to actually as syndustries. It's things like alcohol sales. Believe it or not, in the last recession, lipstick did really well, all things considered. Sweets and candies. I don't know how many may have went shopping and found that the candy aisle had been raided. It's one of those safer kind of low risk, low cost ways to self-indulge and try to kind of self-medicate almost in a semi-healthy kind of a way, through a pandemic in this case or through a recession. These do have limits though. Casino industry fares not so well, obviously in recession times. But even in terms of things like alcohol sales, it can be a little bit more nuanced. We've seen that the cheaper alcohol, the beers and the wines, tend to do better than things like hard liquor. Again, it's a safer, low cost kind of a way to indulge. And then discount retailers. So, your Marshalls, your TJ Maxx's, your Ross Dress for Less, your your Walmarts and things like that. Even Amazon, I would throw into here. And these, I think, in COVID might have a little bit of a different story to tell. It's going to be interesting to see how they do bounce back, compared to the last recession. In terms of some of those occupations that grew the fastest since the last recession, you'll see that this really does fall in line pretty well with what we're talking about here in terms of safer and more at-risk industries. The ones that are a little bit more tech-heavy, healthcare oriented, dealing with aging populations, hearing aid specialists, home health aides, mental health counselors, social workers, athletic trainers. They all kind of have that common core of being a little bit more essential to business, so to speak. Now, in terms of some of the more immediate and direct comparisons to COVID-19 in our current situation, it's important for us to look at this, and take things with a little bit of a grain of salt, I think, because we're really just in the thick of it now, and it's hard to tell what's an immediate kind of a trend and what's going to be a little bit more of a sustained trend. But that's what we're going to take a look at here and see what we can kind of figure out. So in terms of initial impact, obviously our New York Metro tri-state area has been very hard hit, comparatively, and I would say that even across the globe. New Jersey, we're in the ballpark of about 1.2 million unemployment claims as of the other week. New York and New York City is at about 14.5% unemployment rate, and 1.8 million jobs lost in April alone. And what's also interesting about this is the number of people within New York City itself who are in immediate risk industries. So literally over 2 million, and when you consider that the population of New York is about 8.5 million, that's really a staggering number to think about, because of what that means systemically. These are the same individuals who are supporting the economy in so many ways, have responsibilities with rent and childcare, maybe collecting unemployment benefits. So to think of what this means holistically, it tempers our expectations, I think, a little bit in the job search. And again, thinking about how this has significant impact throughout the entire supply chain. Companies, especially since 2008, are much more reluctant to invest in things like inventory up front without knowing that they have purchasers already lined up for this. And so it's affected the way that we just fundamentally do business. And it's not as credit heavy in that sense. But without customers, do you have inventory? Without inventory, do you have manufacturing? And so you see how there's this impact throughout the entire supply chain. So if you look at a place like New York, and if you have literally 2 million out of 8 million people at heavy risk here, that's going to impact spending. just in the community alone? And then how does that impact other industries and other jobs? So there's a lot of considerations here, which again is why the holistic approach is so important. These numbers from Brookings really demonstrate the plight and who might be considered more of a vulnerable worker. So demographically, we're looking at younger workers being much more vulnerable, those who are working part-time or part of the year, seasonal employees, females, as well as those with no more than a high school diploma. And, if you think about what this also means in terms of systemic challenges, these are individuals who at this point probably would not have things like health benefits during a health crisis. Just to kind of put that in context, and also people who, in the case of younger, are just starting out, as we see with our new grads. And how does this systemically set them up, to maybe have challenges down the line for years to come? When we look at the metropolitan areas and for people of color as well, that they tend to be significantly overrepresented within the vulnerable workers. And here, the New York metro area, as well as Trenton, Philly, kind of area, unfortunately, are very high up on this list and represent much more in terms of vulnerability compared to other workers. And if we look at what the overall kind of numbers look like, and you look at the New York and Philly metro areas, we're really potentially, very hard hit by this in terms of having millions of vulnerable workers beyond the 2.2 I just showed, another, 600,000 plus in the Philly area. So systemically, this is something that is a bit sobering, but also has to, I think, temper our expectations as we look at things like the job search and really start to take a closer look at some of these key industries that may or may not be impacted. The industries that have been hit the hardest so far, obviously, leisure and hospitality industry being very high up there. But what's interesting is some of the comparison here between what we saw in 2008 and what we see now, with government and education health services being high up on the list here as well. Now, with education and health services, this might be skewed a little bit because this could include things like dental and the fact that that was shut down. And we do imagine, obviously, that'll come back when the openings are safe to do as part of the phased-in opening. Government can include things like daycares that might have been shut down, and so can education include that as well. So those numbers might be a little bit skewed in terms of being more in that immediate sense versus something more in the sustained kind of a sense. But it gives you an overall kind of picture of which industries are hard hit and how this does kind of trickle down through the entire supply chain. So, recently we had the May jobs report come out in terms of unemployment rate falling, new job gains. It was touted in some circles as being this great victory, which I certainly personally would not endorse, given the totality of the situation and what we need to kind of consider holistically here. That number of 2.5 million jobs, were some of those just simply rehires because businesses had now reopened and it was safe for them to do so and to hire back some of their work staff. So not really a new job so much as a rehire of an existing job. Were they only in select areas? We see where some of these gains were made. And is this something sustainable? Because, as we do a phased-in approach, what happens if there's a second wave of corona? This hits and things have to shut back down fully again. These jobs, I imagine most of them, if not all of them, would go away and would be back in the red again. The idea of now that employers have had a chance to see what work from home is like for a period of time, have they determined that some of these jobs will never come back because they're non-essential, or they can be better served in streamlined operations, or the businesses themselves are just not coming back? So, that's why I have a lot of pause around that kind of a number and celebrating it too much because of what it really could mean in terms of how we're defining essential and non-essential work. Amazon has been a big hire, Instacart, Walmart, Target. But are these going to be more short-term jobs that aren't sustained after the pandemic starts to cease? They're meeting demand right now, and if demand decreases, does that mean those jobs decrease as well? We see where some of these gains were made, obviously, leisure hospitality, but still having a huge deficit. How much of that difference is actually going to come back? Those are some of the things that we need to kind of consider holistically. I apologize for the screenshot not being a little bit more polished. I have a couple of them in here, and the reason is I just attended this great webinar this afternoon, a couple hours ago, by Think Why, and they were talking about their product Labor IQ. And they had some really useful information I thought would be helpful to share with everybody tonight. So I just kind of took a screenshot with my phone, sent myself a picture, and plugged it into the PowerPoint. But credit to Think Why for this. So the most improved sectors that we did see in May, you see actually those negative gains, losses rather, being in government. That can be particularly troublesome for a few reasons. Government is the one that's typically providing assistance when needed. Going to be doing the contact tracing. Do they have funding enough to do that effectively that enables everybody to go back to work in a more comfortable kind of way? Government might be affiliated with things like healthcare and provision of healthcare, but also daycare services. If we don't have healthcare effectively, managed, and we don't have daycare effectively managed, how can people go back to work effectively as well? So it's such a systemic issue that we're talking about, something that we really need to look at so holistically. And that's what I thought was so impactful about this particular slide, is that we do see some gains, which are great, but we have to do that with a little bit of pause still and think about this very strategically. In terms of the businesses that recovered the most jobs during that period, we do see that they could very much be related to the reopening. So again, is that something that could go away again if there's a second wave of shutdowns? Are they sustained? If these businesses are slower to kind of bounce back, because of phased-in approaches, can they sustain as an entity altogether, and do they shut down? So many questions are left by this. But you do see that there's a lot of consistency here with more essential services, more essential kind of businesses, and ones that also would potentially be at the small business level too, not just large scale companies and industries being impacted here. And then, these two slides I thought really captured the idea of why we need to look at this holistically, because what they did was really smart. They took some data around the percentage of civilian workers required to interact with the general public, because obviously that's been the reason for the shutdown on things, right? If you have to physically interact with someone and it's not safe to do so, we have to shut that down. So if you look at the occupations where civilian workers are required to interact, you get a sense of which industries are going to see maybe slower bounce back overall, or a slide back if there is something like a second wave and another peak of corona that we have to deal with. Also, what's come up in the conversation, as you see in the second slide here, are salary comparisons by geography. So if work from home becomes something that is much more widely accepted and practiced, by different organizations, how does that impact things like pay? Because now people are not just necessarily tied to a geographical location. Obviously, we live in one of the most expensive ones in the country, if not the world, in the New York metro area. If we didn't have to live next to our job anymore, because we can telecommute every day, how does that impact where we maybe do live, and then how we can command or not command a larger salary in a place that has a lower cost of living, and how does that impact things like quality of life? So this was a discussion that was starting, at least somewhat before COVID happened, but now has really taken off because of how the coasts tend to be so expensive, West Coast, San Francisco, LA areas specifically, and New York metro area as well. So other things to kind of consider as you're thinking about your job search, and is it going to be a remote opportunity? Does that mean you're tied to a geographical location, et cetera? And what Think Why suggested in terms of some monitoring indicators here, continuing to look at the unemployment trends, especially for those that are continuing claims, because it's going to show if there's actual kind of job growth there and new opportunities, or we're seeing a little bit of the things that kind of gave us pause about that May number in the first place. Watching how the states are reopening, and are they able to continue with the phased-in approach? Do they have to scale that back? Do they have to shut down again? Are we seeing a real rise in cases? That's going to impact so much of the job market as well. Do we see a fourth round of stimulus and something else to help out large and small businesses alike? And looking at those small businesses as health indicators. If you're seeing a lot of shutdown, if you're seeing a lot of people not being rehired at those kind of roles, that's something that would give us pause in terms of the overall kind of employment picture as well. So some recruitment trends, and this graphic is taken from Handshake. Rutgers Handshake is our career management platform. You can use it to look for jobs. There's a job board on there, a lot of tools, resources for career development needs, schedule advising appointments and things of that sort. We'll talk a little more specifically about it at the end with the resources. But Handshake, they did their own kind of survey of employers. And you see the trends, obviously, recruitment-wise, moving virtual pretty much wholeheartedly at this point. I imagine these numbers would be even higher. I think I pulled these in April. Also, employers moving to more virtual events for recruitment, and we'll talk about what that looks like. Willis Towers Watson also did a survey, and it shows the again, to kind of temper expectations a little bit in the job search. A lot of hiring freezes. 42 were already frozen or reduced, 42%. Another 28 probable. And this is going to be somewhat industry specific, obviously, level specific as well, in terms of are you looking at more advanced or more entry level kinds of roles. Layoffs have certainly been occurring, but also furloughs, pay reductions, salary being frozen, and things of that sort. And there's a large number that, if they haven't done it already, are seeming to be seriously considering it at this point. So it's just something that, again, kind of keep in mind as you're looking at the landscape of the job market. But some, for those who are hiring, may be offering some great incentives. So for those mission critical workers, some work from home subsidies, things like helping with Wi-Fi, childcare, office equipment, your utility bills, and things of that sort, depending on the nature of those roles. This graphic comes from candor.co, and this is an open source, so something that you want to vet, certainly in terms of information as an open source. But people are able to post from their jobs and their industries what they're noticing in terms of, are the companies having freezes, layoffs, or hiring. And so the graphic here, the green representing sectors that are hiring, yellow being those that are frozen, and some red in layoffs. And there also are things that seem like they might conflict a little bit here, right? That something like business software seems to have a decent amount of freezing, but also a decent amount of hiring. It could be very niche specific. So business software might relate to things like teleconferencing and the different platforms like Zoom and Microsoft Teams and all of these WebExes and things like that. And so telecom might be doing more of the hiring at this point. So, you kind of have to do a little bit of a deeper dive on it, but just to give you a high level overview on it. You may also see that some organizations are simultaneously doing all three of these. They're freezing in some departments, hiring in others, and actually laying off in others. So, that's where, once you have this high level kind of homework done, you have to do that little bit of a deeper dive. And I think I failed to mention in the beginning, but feel free to take screenshots if you like of some of the links that I provided here. We definitely are recording this. It will be posted. It usually takes about a week or so to get it up online. But feel free to take screenshots or what have you. And then this information comes from Handshake, again, about full-time jobs and internships for students that were available within the system. And again, since the beginning of March, we're seeing some consistency there, things that will help with cost cutting, frontline customer service, things that will help with some of the more tech kind of components and things of that sort. So these were the top job roles and job titles being advertised as of that period. In terms of the overall kind of recruitment outlook and how COVID has impacted this, traditional talent acquisition, people would hire in person, have interviews, go to career fairs, host, job fairs on site, things of that sort, a lot more obviously in-person networking. And now obviously things have gone very virtual and artificial intelligence oriented AI. So companies are relying so much more on AI to find those quality candidates and quality matches. And part of how they're doing this is looking for things like your work from home capabilities. So think about on your resume, are you highlighting that you're proficient in Zoom, in Microsoft Teams, Slack, WebEx, Skype, any of these kinds of platforms that people are typically using. But also looking at how you can start to get in tune with virtual event recruitment. So there's virtual career fairs now and virtual recruitment events that companies are hosting. And so signing up to be a part of those and being comfortable with the tech that's going to be involved, and practicing that as much as you can, having a good presence, in a digital sense. So your background is good, your sound quality is good, background noise, lighting, all of those kinds of things. But just your comfort level even with it, because that's going to come across so much in how you portray yourself. And then, how this also translates to things like interviewing, because, there's these apps and software that's utilized now, like HireVue or Yellow. And essentially, you're taking a pre-screening with pre-recorded questions that are asked of you. You log into this platform, and then you have, 2 or 3 minutes or so to give your response. It's recorded, and then that's viewed later by an HR professional who then makes the decision as to whether to pursue bringing you in for an actual interview or more of a face-to-face or virtual interview of sorts. Knowing that this exists, that it might be part of a first round screening, being comfortable with it, because it can be very awkward, to do this on your mobile device or even sometimes on your laptop, and to give an interview question response on the spot within a truncated time frame and not to an actual person, but knowing that it's being recorded. The other component of this, and I don't mean to scare anybody, but just to be transparent about it, is they're utilizing artificial intelligence in some cases to read things like your facial mannerisms as you're recording these responses. So they're looking for, some of those cues that would indicate, maybe deception or a level of discomfort or something like that. So the more practiced you are, the more comfortable with it you are. And even if it's just, watching yourself give a response on, your own phone as you record it just for yourself, something to get you more acclimated with it, then that nervousness of utilizing a platform like this doesn't get mistaken for something like deception. So now, we've talked about obviously the landscape quite a bit and how to kind of view this job search holistically, what kind of considerations to take into account. Let's take a look at actual implementation strategy and how you can start to utilize an effective mindset, especially during these times, your marketing materials and how you market to an audience, as well as developing the materials that are going to count and matter. So in terms of your mindset, it's really beneficial to start off with obviously a very positive mindset for this, because it can be a challenge. And how you frame your experience, whether you're internalizing your success or not, whether you're internalizing the challenges or not, and not getting the kind of response that maybe you're hoping for on some of these applications. So having a positive mindset and realizing that it is a tough market. Obviously I think talked about the expectation setting part of that, and working on the things that are within your control to do, things to improve, things to set as goals for yourself. And so that's what we're going to talk about very briefly here. With a SWOT analysis, really looking at your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and your threats. And some of you have probably done this for your jobs or things like that, but you can do your own internal SWOT too. What are those internal characteristics that you have that are really strong, that are going to enable you to be an asset? Are they transferable skills, cross-functional skills? Are your skills kind of future-proof? Are they technical in orientation? Do you work in an industry that is ubiquitous and you can take and go into a different, any number of sectors like in HR or marketing and IT? What weaknesses do you have? Maybe you're just not that strong with the digital platforms like right now in terms of communication, but that's something you can practice, you can get better at. But being aware of it and owning up to it and then acknowledging it and moving forward to try to improve upon it is really the crucial part. Opportunities, do you maybe work in one of these industries? This is something external to you. Do you work in an industry that is not going to be as impacted by this? Okay, that's a great opportunity. Maybe you look for opportunities within that industry, or just stay put for now and don't actively engage in the job search. And threats, maybe you work in one of the other industries that isn't so safe. And so now you see, is it possible to make a transition? Is it a smart time? Am I looking for risk factors at my individual job that might indicate something not so wonderful is coming down the line? So this level of self-assessment and self-awareness and knowing what your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats are so that you can use your strengths and your opportunities to help mitigate those weaknesses and threats. Your SMART goals. So the goal of getting a job is not really a goal in and of itself. It's not something you can control, but you can control getting your resume critiqued, practicing your interviewing skills, having a career coaching session, networking with 5 contacts this week. Those are things that when you put all those pieces together will lead to the outcome that you want. But those are actual goals, and it's good to set them as SMART goals because it's making incremental progress in the direction that you ultimately want to go. So looking for goals that are specific, they're measurable, they're achievable or attainable, and also realistic and time bound. So ultimately a SMART goal would be something like, I'm going to get my resume critiqued through career services at Rutgers, and I'll do it by the end of this week. It's something that is specific. It's certainly measurable because you'll know whether you did it or not. You can achieve it. It's attainable. It's relevant to your goals. And it's something that you put a time stamp on in terms of doing it within a period of time. Those tend to be the more helpful approaches that you put the building blocks together and then you get an overall good result in terms of the outcome that you want. And then obviously having as much support and balance. Who are your sources of strength, your encouragement? How can you stay balanced? The job search should not be your job at this point. It just puts too much strain and you're not operating at your best. So making sure that you're balanced mentally, physically, emotionally, even spiritually. And so you're taking that holistic approach to support and balance. It helps, especially in the beginning, to focus your efforts. So looking at how you can tailor your search strategy and approach. So identifying specific job titles, organizations, companies, professional associations, industries, and then narrowing that list down as much as you feel comfortable with, certainly, but having a targeted list versus just applying to anything that you see on Indeed. When you have the quality approach over the quantity approach, it helps to streamline your efforts, make it less frustrating. But also the real benefit of this is you're more in tune with the opportunities you're really actually interested in. So because of this, you're following those companies on social media. You're connecting with employees at the organization itself. And you're moving in a direction that is much more dedicated and intentional. And that tends to be much more successful. So it also enables you to prepare your things like your materials a lot better. Because some companies may call a job a different title. Some might call it a social media strategist and others a marketing coordinator. But when you're in touch with what the lingo is, the keywords, the phrases, you speak that same language in your materials, in your resume, your cover letter, your interview, and they start to see you as one of them, so to speak. So being more in tune with the organizations, getting job alerts directly from them, signing up for their social media accounts, it gives you a lot more talking points and ammunition to really execute on your search strategy a lot more effectively. When you're thinking about now, okay, I've got my networking contacts, my organizations, I know who and what I want to target, you want to make sure you have a good message that you're sending forth as well. So think about your marketing in this approach. What is your goal? Who is your audience? And what is the message you want to convey? And ultimately, what you want to do with this is communicate the value you represent. you have to think of it in very simple terms. There's a need that they have. What do I possess that can help fill that need and differentiate me from others while doing it? And if you have that three-step knowledge piece, so to speak, it can help you to clarify things like your resume, your cover letter, interview materials, and things like that, but also just help you to stand out because it's a very clear and focused message that you're sending to the individuals on the other side. And because of that, it cancels out some all, the noise and the confusion and the things that we're hearing because we're so inundated with all these other messages. And making personalized connections whenever you can is really crucial to this part, with networking, which we're going to talk about in just a second. So as you look at your message and how to display your value to others, you can follow something like this, a simple three-step process. And this is, certainly more in the business realm, but you have to look at yourself as a business because you're marketing yourself, your products, your services. They're your skill sets and your experiences and your education. And those are the things that people are going to buy into. They're going to buy into you and who you are and what you represent and what you bring to the table. So you want to be able to clearly identify that for your customer, so to speak, your customer being your hiring manager, the organization you're applying to a job with, that kind of a thing. So identify the benefit for them. Look at how you can provide that benefit. What is that need that they have? How can you fill that need? And how can you differentiate yourself based off of your skills, your background, your experience, your connections, your passions, your interests? What is it that makes you somebody who may be uniquely qualified for this? Or maybe it's just the total package of who you are and what you represent that you're bringing to the table here. This image is so crucial because, and especially now in this day and age, employers are hiring in a certain direction. And usually we work in the opposite direction when we want to look for jobs. Usually when I'm working with people and I say, okay, walk me through your job search. First thing they'll do is bring me to Indeed or Monster or some other kind of a job board. But in a lot of cases, that's one of the last places employers really want to look. They prefer referrals, people who previously worked there, interned there, people who come on a personal referral from maybe an external contact or a relationship that they have established with something like a recruitment agency. So they work from the bottom up. It's more personal based. People that they know firsthand or that someone in their close circle may know. And then, it saves them time, it saves them money, and it also ensures more of a known entity, which tends to be a safer kind of an investment. They're investing time and energy and resources into training and into the process. It's not free for them to post jobs on job boards. So if they can get a great referral from someone that they trust and they know that this person will work out here, they'd much more likely take that. But it also saves them time. Instead of going through 200-300 applications online, if they got 3 referrals and they bring those 3 people into interview, that saved them a lot of time and effort. And they feel more comfortable most likely with that hire. So always keep this pyramid in mind that, we want to try to make the employer's job a lot easier. And if we start getting on the same level as them, we can tend to have more success and an easier time of it. And one of the ways that you can do this is by networking with Rutgers alumni. So simple 3-step process on something like LinkedIn. Go to your search bar, do a search for Rutgers University. You'll know that it's Rutgers University, the main page, because we have over 250,000 alumni on there. And then do a simple search by the tab there on number 3 for alumni. You can filter by keywords and job titles, organizations. You can look at where they live, where they work, what they majored in, so many different features, and narrow that list down for yourself. And alumni tend to be warmer leads. They are more responsive than just kind of cold calling, if you will, on LinkedIn to random people. So always worthwhile to tap into the alumni network and see who's out there. And what I recommend for that too is actually not just getting in touch with people within your field or industry, but also look for people in HR who are recruiters that are alumni, because they're the front line. They're the job posters. They're the screeners of resumes. They're the ones who link you to the hiring manager. They're the gatekeepers. So look at both your field and where you want to be in terms of industry and job titles, but also look at HR professionals. Which brings us to materials. So in terms of how COVID-19 recruitment has been impacting this rise of artificial intelligence and the machines, to borrow the title from, I think, Terminator, um, uh, virtual and AI is the new normal. I mean, it was only increasing anyway, and this has just kind of bumped up the time frame on it. So when you're attending things like virtual career fairs, a lot of times employers will get a copy of resume books. And so this is just basically a book of resumes from all attendees. When you sign up, if you upload your resume to the virtual event, chances are they're getting a resume book at the end of it. So this idea of making your resume ATS friendly, or applicant tracking system friendly, is really, really critical. You have to show the match, because when you prepare your resume, it isn't just a human set of eyes reading this, but it's a software program that is tracking keywords and phrases. So you want to show that you're a great match for this. And the way that you do it is by utilizing something like the STAR method. STAR method is also referred to as PAR or CAR. It just depends on, what you feel more comfortable with, or is easier to remember. But STAR stands for situation, task, actions, results. PAR is problem, action, results. CAR is challenge, action, results. And basically what you're doing is walking your reader through, if you're doing this as a bullet point on your resume, for example, a 3-step process. What you did, how you did it, why was it important, or what was that result? What was the purpose behind why you did what you did? Try to quantify when possible. If you can say you increased sales in the third quarter by 25% because of the social media marketing campaign that you implemented on Facebook, go for it. Sometimes you can't do that, though. You may not have numbers. So talk about the purpose and being purposeful and purpose-driven behind why you did what you did. And it has to be loaded with keywords, phrases, and skills. So again, the more intimately you know the companies, the job postings, what they're looking for in terms of the main skills, education requirements, qualifications, things of that sort, you want to highlight those things most profoundly on your resume. So you're putting them in the bullet points, you're putting them in a professional summary at the top, but you're also utilizing this in things like your elevator pitch. You're utilizing it in email correspondence. You're utilizing it in cover letters. You're utilizing it in interviews. So this STAR method and this 3-step kind of process to answering a question helps you to tap into that value proposition that you have, and gives you a framework for it, essentially, so that you can connect whatever it is you provide to the need that that company and that organization has, so that you can show you're a great match. But it also helps you to beat the ATS, or applicant tracking software systems. So thinking of along those lines, digital resumes and ATS, you want to keep your resume simple, concise, no fancy, frameworks with borders, icons, tables, charts, graphs. Leave all of that off. It just messes it up in the system. And then if they can't read it properly, they're not going to take the time to try to decipher it. They just move on to the next. So you're really doing yourself more of a disservice. If you do have a resume that has those things on, you may bring that to the actual interview, or share it as a PDF file in an email attachment. It's much better viewed in person with somebody. Look for quality over quantity in terms of how you're portraying your experience. So how does the quality of your experience, the totality of it, lend itself to this role? And then you're able to tailor your resume in a way that makes sense to the audience. They don't care if you worked at Starbucks, 12 years ago while you were in college. If you're going for a, marketing job as a manager of a creative department now 12 years later. So, streamline it, go with the quality that matches up directly with that position. Utilize those keywords and phrases. When possible, make it clickable. If you have links to portfolios, to your LinkedIn profile, to publications that you have, make those hyperlinks so that they can utilize that effectively. Tailor it as much as you can, obviously, to match those jobs. So usually best rule of thumb, have a working resume that is just the master resume. It could be however long you want it to be. But then you start to just pare that down as a template for a given type of role. And you limit it to 1 to 2 pages in most cases, depending on your level of experience. In terms of how all of COVID and the new normal and all of this impacts what we need to do to be effective and stand out in our job search, we really have to be as proactive as possible. And so We talked a little bit about enhancing our video and digital presence, our comfort level with those things, proficiency levels. That could tie in with things that we're looking at for professional development or continuing education opportunities. But it also goes beyond that. Think of the skills that are most crucial to your industry or the industries you want to transition into. And then how do you start to upskill there? Certificate programs, courses, nano degrees, micro learning. There's some affordable options out there, some that are more expensive. It doesn't mean having to go back and get a whole nother degree in most cases. Refining and tailoring the search process, as we talked about, so you're going with those quality connections, looking at it as investing in relationships, and establishing a strong network. And that's what's really going to carry people through. When we do, even in a typical kind of year, we look at how people are obtaining jobs, somewhere between about 60 to 80%. And that's been the number consistently since like the 1980s. 60 to 80% are found through the hidden job market. And that's just really tapped into through networking and who you know and who knows you, because these are jobs that aren't necessarily even posted online. So imagine how it is now in a tighter labor market with more competition, unemployment, budget freezes, all of that. It becomes that much more crucial to have that strong network. Seek out some of those virtual opportunities and recruitment fairs and events, and really focus on boiling it down to relevancy, value, and need, and how you meet those things, how you can portray that to others. And in terms of a way that you can stand out, just as a general tip, what some people have been doing and finding success with is actually recording very short, 30 to 60-second elevator pitches, and obviously making sure it's good quality, a good background, you're dressed nicely, it's polished, but they include that in emails with networking contacts or hiring managers as application material where you can upload other documents and things. Maybe putting it on a LinkedIn profile or something like that, because in this day of digital contact, it gives us so much more a chance to see somebody live rather than just looking at their resume. So consider even that kind of a thing. People are thinking a little outside the box in terms of how they can stand out. And lastly, tonight, I just want to briefly cover some resources with you. This resource comes from the state of New Jersey. So over 53,000 jobs posted, almost 1,000 companies, and a wide variety of roles here too across the state. Many are at an Amazon warehouse or at a Walmart or that kind of a thing. But if you're looking for stopgap employment or just need to make ends meet at this point, it's a great resource for that. The other thing, and those aren't the only kind of jobs on there though. But the other thing I like about this is that they're vetted, because there are a lot of scammers out there these days taking advantage, unfortunately. So, this being published on the state government website, it's through reputable and reliable sources. Austin Belsack has a website, Cultivated Culture, and he made a really nice resource here in terms of this job market guide, and talked about some of the different industries that are hiring, general job advice, some market insights and things like that. So you'll see that they do align very much with telecom, tech, essential businesses and things of that sort. But he has a really nice resource there. If you have some time to check it out, I definitely recommend it. This is another open resource, but it talks about roles, has links to applications, locations, dates of postings, and these are the major areas that were kind of highlighted in this levels website. Ones that are more operation oriented, so tech, HR, finance, data, sales, marketing, but has a wide variety of roles listed there, as does this ongoing blog from Andrew Seaman. Andrew works for LinkedIn, and he posts a Who's Hiring Now article, and it lists out, a number of organizations, how many positions they have posted, the type of position, and that kind of a thing. So great for, looking at additional kinds of resources that might be available for you at this time. And then we're proud of our Rutgers resources that we have to offer as well. So July 22nd, this actually just got finalized. We're having a Hire New York Metro Virtual Alumni Career Fair. All alumni and graduating seniors are welcome. And what's great about these hire fairs is that they don't just look at entry-level kind of positions. They do have those, certainly, but they also have more mid-level and senior level roles available. for alumni, and that's why it's an alumni-only career fair. So they are a little bit more advanced opportunities here. And it's going to take place from 10 to 4, July 22nd. The registration link is here. Again, that's going to be posted very shortly on our events page, ouralumni.com events page. And again, if you need to take screenshots or anything, feel free. You can register at the site here with Hire Talent. We have our Working Lunch webinar series. We've done a variety of topics. Some have some overlap here with job quest and recession resistance, but also personal branding, networking, and a few other topics. So you can always access our recordings through the ouralumni.com/career resources website. So look for the webinar series. We're always adding new content there on a fairly regular basis. Student Alumni Career Connect is a great networking tool for alumni to alumni networking. You can also volunteer to do student mentoring if you're interested in that. It's free for alumni to access it. And you basically, only need like 2 minutes to sign up for it. You can import your data from LinkedIn, and it's really just Rutgers community networking opportunities there. And mentoring as well. So a chance to give back if you like, and you can totally set that in your preferences. If you just want to network for yourself, that's completely fine too. But certainly worth checking out. Career Shift is a job posting database, also a networking resource, free alumni access, taken care of courtesy of the RUAA. And Career Shift is nice because you can do a job search here. It's an aggregated search, going to pull from multiple resources. But then you can actually find networking contacts and alumni at the organizations there through this resource itself. So you can sign up for a free account, again, through the Our Alumni site. And as alumni, you also, courtesy of the RUAA, get access to the Grammarly Premium account. So this is great for, proofreading resume, cover letter, personal statement. You have 3 months of free access. There's no cost involved. If you run out of your 3 months, you can just submit another form and you can get another 3 months free as well. You can access that again through the website. But a great resource, even if you're thinking about, personal statements for grad school or something like that. If you're thinking about going back for continuing ed, great opportunity, because literally 60% of resumes contain a typo in them. And about 40% of hiring managers will automatically eliminate a resume with a typo on it. So I think, with my math being somewhat correct, about a quarter of your competition you can eliminate by just simply having no typos in your resume. So consider a resource like this, please. And then I mentioned before, Rutgers Handshake. It is campus specific, so just contact your campus career center or look on their websites for how to access it. And they have job boards. Interview Stream is a great way to practice your digital interviewing skills. You can basically go on there and download preloaded questions. You have a person that's pre-recorded asking you that question, and then you give a recorded response. So it helps you practice for things like that higher view screening process, or just a digital interview where you might be face-to-face, so to speak, with somebody over the computer. It gets you more acclimated to that, but you can also practice your interview techniques as well, and you can actually record it to review it later, or have someone else you trust or a career advisor take a look at it with you to give you some pointers and tips. And again, that's a resource with free alumni access. And this is just a list of the resources I used to compile the program. I'm a little bit over there. I do apologize for that, but I'd be happy to stay on and take any questions at this time.
Thank you so much, Colin. I apologize to those of you if there's some feedback. I have 2 questions here for you. When simplifying one's resume, is it better to have your resume uploaded as an RTF or as a doc?
So with the resume, I would typically go with a PDF or a doc. PDF helps preserve formatting, which certainly can be an issue if people have different versions of Word. Maybe theirs is outdated or something like that, and then it could appear that your resume is not formatted as neatly as you had intended it to be. So I typically recommend a PDF because it locks it in first, and then a doc is usually acceptable as well.
Thank you. Colin, I have one more question here for you.
Sure.
And it's how do you leverage volunteer experience to explain the resume gaps?
Great question. So with volunteer experience, it's best when you can make it somewhat relevant. So I've worked with, some individuals who may be very active in, let's say their church or something like that, and they have some accounting background and skills. So they're able to do accounting work for their church. And so it's something that's still directly relevant to their field, which is optimal. But if you don't have something as directly related as that, it's still okay to utilize as long as you're showing some transferability there. Think of project management or project coordination or people management if you were helping to manage volunteers. Things related to business administration, budgeting, scheduling, various kinds of skill sets that could be cross-functional, apply to a variety of different areas or contexts, but that you can still use to help make you marketable. One of the ones I'll see people have a lot of success with actually is something like marketing, because they can utilize social media platforms. Maybe they have a little bit of background in graphic design and Adobe or something, but it tends to help them provide a little bit of a substantive material around that gap.
Great. Thank you, Colin. I think that is it for the questions right now. Tanya, do you want to close out the program for us?
Sure. Thanks, Dana and Colin and everyone who's able to join us this evening. We really enjoyed getting to hear more about job search strategy and tips. You will all receive a follow-up email, which will include the links that Colin shared with you, as well as ways to stay connected with the Rutgers Club of New York City and the Rutgers University Alumni Association. And we also encourage you just to check out ouralumni.com for upcoming events. Thanks so much, and have a great evening.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.